dog just made a really weird noise. Another very kind donation from Charlie Cavai, who was very generous to send me a little range of samples. That's not helping, dog. I know you're hot. It is unseasonably warm at the moment. We're in early September, and the UK is not the warmest country in the world anyway, but these last couple of days have just been ridiculously muggy and hot, and I apologise if I look a bit sweaty. There's no wind at all, and it's just really, really cloyingly muggy and uncomfortable. It's very, very strange for September. Very strange for the UK generally, to be perfectly honest, particularly up here in Yorkshire. It's like summer's sort of shifted a couple of months and it's going towards the end of the year. So anyway, Charlie sent me this, which is Grand Old Parr. And this is the Old Parr, Grand Old Parr 12-year-old. Now, this is what the bottle looks like, and if you're in the UK, it's highly unlikely that you'll come across this, even though it is actually owned by Diageo and bottled in Fife, which is here. So Grand Old Parr was a blended whisky that was introduced in 1909 by a company called the Greenlees Brothers in London, which I think was another one of these sort of grocers that were blending their own whisky. And Grand Old Parr is named after a gentleman called Old Tom Parr, who is sort of not a living legend, but is sort of a myth, but he did actually exist. Legend has it that he was the oldest. He's the oldest person that's lived in Britain, at least. Supposedly in 1635, he died at the age of 152, and this is a picture of him now. Now, it seems highly unlikely that he did actually die at this age. Apparently, he was fathering bastard children at the age of 100. It's that sort of legend, but he did exist. He is a real person. And they basically kind of used his name as a sort of indication of age in the whisky. Now, Greenlees was acquired in 1925 by the Distillers Company Limited, DCL, who eventually became Diageo. So the Grand Old Parr brand is owned by Diageo. But it's very, very big overseas. So it's predominantly Japan and South America, and Mexico is also really huge. And apparently in 2010, 52% of all the sales in, Venezuela? No, Colombia. 52% of all sales of Scotch, all Scotch, not just blended, all Scotch, was of Grand Old Parr in Colombia. So it's very, very big in South America. So they don't really do it in the UK. Europe a bit, but South America and Japan is very, very big indeed. So they do the Grand Old Parr 12-year-old, they do an Old Parr, which is 15-year-old, and then Old Parr Superior, which is an 18-year-old. Now, Charlie has put some information on the label, Real Antique and Rare Old Deluxe, probably blended in the 1970s. So what I'm assuming he means by this is actually a Grand Old Parr that is quite an old bottling of it. My guess would be that they're maintaining some consistency of it to keep up the demand and keep the sales going, because any major change to a blended whisky, unless it's done over a long period of time so that people don't really realise, can be a risk at the market. It's possible that the Grand Old Parr that is out there now, which is, I couldn't actually find how much it was in South America. In the US I found a few places selling it, a few merchants were selling it for $30, which for a 12-year-old Scotch is not a bad price actually in America. Over here, I did find it, Drink Supermarket, which is a website, they were selling it for 50 quid, but they did actually say it is hard to find in the UK. So they've obviously managed to find it from somewhere, and almost it's made up in Scotland, but they bought it from overseas to bring it back to the UK. So expensive for over here, yes, but you can't get it over here. South America, I don't know, probably the equivalent of like 20 quid, maybe 15, 20 quid. If it's selling that amount of money, I can't imagine that it's going to be particularly expensive. But it's whether the version that you're getting now, you're paying that price for, is vastly different to what is in here. If I think Charlie has sent me one from an old bottling, but we'll go with it because I've not been able to find Grand Old Parr anywhere else, and you know I am very grateful for what everybody has donated to me. Apparently, Cragganmore and Glendullan are the key component parts of this blended whisky, and as I say, it's bottled in Fife. And Jesus, Charlie, you have proper filled this up, mate. I don't really want to do that, but I've just managed to pour it all over my hand. You poured that right to the top, Charlie. You did that deliberately, didn't you? Because you knew that I was going to end up pouring it over my hand. I really have to wash my hands now. So Grand Old Parr is actually quite highly regarded. It seems to, its popularity seems to be because of a good reason. And it's 12-year-old blended Scotch. So the malt whiskies that are in it are a minimum of 12-year-old. So we've got, if we've got 12-year-old Cragganmore at the youngest and 12-year-old Glendallan, we've got some decent whiskies in there. So I'm very, very interested to see what this is like, because it's not one I've ever come across before. I actually thought I was getting it confused with Grand McNish, because when I was thinking about the bottle, I was like, hang on. So I read somewhere that it was known for its dimpled bottle, because if you looked at the bottle picture, it's kind of square, but the side of the bottle's got this weird kind of dimpled effect. But when I read that, I instantly thought of the Grand McNish, which was the bottle that sort of had the weird kind of like whatever the cheese is that's got the holes cut into it, kind of like that. And I thought, hang on, have I had this one already? Found a picture of the bottle. No, I definitely haven't. So I'd be very, very intrigued to see what this is like. And a really good kind of orange colour to it, almost like a burnt orange colour. Very, very nice colour. I would hazard a guess that colouring's been added, but it's a lovely sort of, it's almost burnt orange colour. That's really, really nice. Now there's a really soft smokiness to this. And actually, if there is some smokiness to this, it'd be very interesting to see what this is like, having just had the Fyrian, which was lightly peated and really unbalanced and not particularly pleasant at all. Whereas this doesn't have as much of an obvious smokiness to it than the Fyrian did, but it's still very soft, very sweet smokiness, very gentle, there's a slight mintiness to it, a slight freshness to it, but there's also kind of like an orange peel feel to it as well. Nice on the nose, that. Very, very pleasant. Really good balance to it as well. And the freshness kind of lifts everything as well. Smokiness that's there on the nose isn't really there on the palate, but the oranginess is. The orange peel feel, particularly on the finish. Lovely rich mouthfeel, very, very silky. Not particularly deep on the palate, not bags of flavour, but what there is pleasant, and on the finish, the freshness sort of comes back. And there is an orange peel, an orange zest to it. And there's a bit of toffee, and the grain element to it, I don't know what the split is of grain to malt whiskey, but the grain element to it is just enough to kind of cut through, finish everything off, but it's not too overpowering, it's not too metallic, it's not too harsh, it doesn't, it's not sharp or anything like that. If anything, it's slightly lacking just like a layer of depth. It needs something a little bit richer and deeper underneath. It's got some nice light flavours. It's quite a light whiskey, and it's almost like there's a light flavour, there's a medium flavour, a kind of where the oranginess comes in. So less of the fresh stuff at the top, but this is where the orange peel comes in, and there's a bit of depth, and it feels like it needs something deeper under that underlying of either maltiness or sherry or some kind of richness, just to really kind of fill out the gaps. It just feels like it's lacking something, some depth. Otherwise it would be fantastic. It's almost, I'd be interested to see what the 15 and the 18-year-olds are like, because I think that the extra aging on the whiskies that are within it might actually provide that depth and that richness that I think this is just ever so slightly lacking. But it's a pleasant whiskey, it's pretty well balanced, there's not the smokiness, there's not the smokiness on the nose, on the palate, it's just not there. And maybe something like that would just really finish the whiskey off on the palate. But overall, it's pretty decent. There's a slight oakiness that comes through as well. To me, it just feels like it's lacking something, a certain kind of like, ethereal element that's almost unexplainable. It just needs something, and to me it just needs a bit more richness to just round everything off. It's a little bit lighter than I think it necessarily needs to be, but it's a decent whiskey, and I can kind of see why it's so popular. I can imagine that there's probably more interesting whiskies for that price range. It's pretty middle of the road. It's pretty safe, and it surprises me how big it is in South America, having tried it, because it's kind of lacking a little bit of everything, which may be why it is so popular, because it doesn't really have anything that anybody would be offended by. It doesn't have any smokiness, doesn't have any richness. It's just kind of like slap bang in the middle of the flavour profile, and therefore as many people as possible would like it. It's not that it's boring, it's just, like I say, it's just lacking some kind of substance. But interesting nonetheless. Charlie, thank you very much. That's another one down. It's always interesting to try these things. I now need to go and wash my hands because I have Grand Old Parr on my fingers. That sounds a bit wrong. So I shall see you at the next one. Cheers.